If you're hearing this right now, don't scroll away just yet. Take a breath and listen. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Tell me in the comments, and if you feel the same chill that I do, leave a sub, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see the world. Somewhere in the ancient lands of the Middle East, there is a story whispered across centuries. Deep beneath a forgotten temple, carved from cold stone, lies a hidden chamber where no light has touched for thousands of years. Inside, explorers once found a burned parchment made of goatskin, its edges blackened by fire, still carrying the faint scent of incense and thyme. Etched on it was a single name, Solomon, the king once known for wisdom beyond all men. But in the stories buried beneath his legend, Solomon was not just a ruler. He was a seeker, a man who dared to speak with shadows, who wanted to understand both angels and demons, light and darkness, good and evil. They say he did not summon spirits to command them, but to listen, to learn why darkness exists in every human heart. Maybe that is why this story still matters. Because each of us, in our own quiet way, is trying to understand the same thing. They called it the Lesser Key of Solomon. But maybe it was never just a book. It feels more like a mirror, reflecting how humans chase power while wrestling with their own fears. In those fragile pages, between the lines of ancient symbols, there is something deeply human, a desire to control what can never be fully held. Solomon, the king of wisdom, understood that darkness is not an enemy to destroy but a truth to face. He knew that every shadow we fear outside is born from the one that hides within. When he drew circles of light and spoke names long forgotten, he was not commanding demons, he was calling out the hidden parts of the human soul, the fear, the doubt, the longing to be free. Maybe that is why his legend still lingers. Because we are not so different. We build our own rituals. We repeat words of faith. We whisper dreams into the night, all hoping to feel a sense of control. Yet the more we try to hold the world in our hands, the more it slips away, until we realize the real key is not power, but understanding. The key of Solomon was never meant to open gates of magic. It opens the gates within, the place where each of us must meet ourselves, unguarded, fragile, and real, and perhaps find peace in the simple act of knowing who we truly are. Goetia, to many people, is a book about demons, about forbidden rituals and dark invocations. But when you look closer, you realize it is not really about demons at all. It is a book about humanity, about how we confront the darkness that lives quietly within each of us. Every spirit in the Goetia is not just a monster from another world, but a reflection of human emotion, a symbol of desire, fear, pride, or longing for recognition. Solomon called their names not to rule over darkness, but to understand why it exists. He realized that each of these spirits mirrors the complexity of the human soul, its contradictions, its hunger, its fragile need for meaning. When we read the name Baal, the first king in the Goetia, we do not just imagine a creature with three faces, we see a human being hiding behind many masks. When we hear of Paimon, the spirit of wisdom and pride, we recognize a part of ourselves, that quiet voice that wants to prove our worth in a noisy world. Goetia is not the language of hell, it is the language of the mind, the raw truth about what it means to be human. It makes us wonder how many times we have summoned those same spirits without realizing it. When we lose our temper, when envy burns inside us, when we wish pain upon someone else, the spirits of Goetia are not distant. They are there, in our eyes, in our choices, in our silence. Perhaps the most frightening thing is not that Solomon spoke to demons, but that he dared to listen. He understood that even darkness carries a spark of light. And maybe that is why Goetia still chills us today, because deep down, each of us carries voices waiting to be heard, whispering from the shadows of our own heart. In the early years of the 20th century, when electric lights first began to chase away the smoke-filled nights of Chicago, there was a man named L.W. de Laurence. He was not a saint, not a magician, not even a scholar by title, but a man haunted by curiosity. He believed that some knowledge, even when forbidden, deserved to be understood. In a small room filled with the sound of printing presses and the scent of ink and paper, he began to copy every line of an old manuscript known as the Goetia. Some said he wanted power, others believed he was searching for truth. But maybe, deep inside, he was simply trying to understand what it means to face the unknown. Every stroke of his pen felt like a heartbeat of history coming alive again. As the words reappeared on the page, so did the questions buried in human memory. Why do we fear what we cannot see? Why are we drawn to mysteries that could destroy us? He did not know that what he was doing would give Goetia a new life, turning it from a burned parchment hidden beneath stone into a story that would travel through time. People who knew him said he often worked late into the night, the warm light from his lamp casting long shadows across his desk. Sometimes he would pause, close his eyes, and listen, as if something beyond the walls was whispering back. Maybe it was not the voices of spirits, but of history itself, asking to be remembered. Because of him, the Goetia was no longer just a book of magic. It became a symbol of human curiosity, of that fragile balance between fear and wonder, between what we should leave untouched and what we are born to explore. And perhaps, in that dim Chicago room, de Laurence found what every seeker hopes to find. Not power, but meaning. They say the rituals of the Goetia were not written for the faint of heart. They were for those willing to stand at the edge of their own fear and not turn away. Imagine a quiet night centuries ago. A man alone in a dimly lit chamber, a single candle flickering beside him. He draws a circle on the cold floor not as a symbol of power but of protection. Every line, every whisper, every breath carries the weight of his belief that there is something greater than himself, something he must face to understand. Before the ritual begins, he must purify himself. He washes in silence, speaks prayers of forgiveness, and dresses in white linen to remind himself that he is still human. The sword in his hand is not meant to harm, but to hold his will steady. The incense burns, curling in the air like the thoughts he cannot control. He kneels, trembling, not from fear of demons, but from the truth that the real battle is always inside. The ritual is not a show of magic. It is a mirror of discipline, of focus, of confronting what hides within the soul. To speak to darkness, one must first listen to it. To command it, one must learn to command oneself. When the old texts describe the circle of Solomon, they are describing more than geometry. It is the boundary between what we can control and what we must accept. Each word of invocation, each breath of courage, is an act of faith, not in spirits, but in the strength of the human spirit. Because in the end, every ritual, no matter how ancient, begins and ends with one question. Do we have the courage to face what lives inside us, and still choose to stand in the light? The circle is more than a line on the ground. It is a simple shape with deep meaning. In Solomon's time, it was a wall between people and mysteries, between daily life and unseen whispers. Yet every person carries a circle inside. It is the line we draw in fear. This far, and no farther. Here I am safe. When Solomon entered his circle, he trapped not demons but his own fear. The world outside fell silent. Shouting, wind, and rush all vanished. Only silence remained, deep enough to hear his heartbeat. His thoughts echoed like voices in an empty room. No monsters waited. He faced only himself. In that small space, Solomon learned hard truths. power without wisdom becomes a storm that destroys everything. Faith without humility is a tall tree with shallow roots. It falls in the wind. The circle became a mirror. It showed how little we control. It also showed the strength of letting go. We still draw circles today, without chalk or holy words. In our minds, we allow some thoughts and block others. In our homes, we claim safe corners. In friendships, we share only so much. We call them comfort zones or boundaries. We call them peace. But no circle lasts forever. What we push away always finds a way in. A buried worry rises at night. An avoided truth appears in morning light. A locked-out pain knocks softly. These are not enemies. They are teachers. They say growth starts where comfort ends. The circle was never meant to hold you always. The old books warned, do not leave until the work is done. Many thought this meant magic, keeping spirits away. But perhaps it was about courage. It was about staying when you want to run. It was about facing your shadow without looking away. Every circle is a test. It asks, how long can you stand in silence? How long can you hear your heart? How long can you face hidden parts of yourself and still trust light will come? The answer lies in staying, not fleeing. Draw your circle when the world is loud. Step inside for rest. But know this, the circle is a start, not the end. One day you will step out, not weak, but ready. You will carry its lessons. You will walk without fear. The truest circle was never on the ground. It lives in the courage of your heart. There were 72 names written in the Goetia, 72 voices that once answered Solomon when he called into the darkness. Each name was said to belong to a spirit, a power, a fragment of something beyond the human world. But when you read them today, when you say them softly to yourself, they do not sound like monsters. They sound like emotions, like memories, like parts of us that we pretend not to hear. The first was Baal, the king who could make men invisible. But invisibility, when you think about it, is something we all crave. We hide behind masks, behind screens, behind smiles, hoping the world will not see our weakness. Then came Agares, who teaches languages and brings back those who run away. Maybe he represents the part of us that wants to return to who we were before life hardened us. There was Bur, who heals the body and the mind, a reminder that every person carries the power to heal, if only they have the patience to listen. Each name in the Goetia carries a story like this. Some speak of pride, some of lust, some of curiosity, and some of pain. They are not all evil, they are human. The 72 spirits are reflections of the 72 emotions, temptations, and truths that live inside the human heart. Solomon did not summon them to destroy them, but to understand them, to give a name to the forces that shape us. Because what is named can be faced, and what is faced can be healed. Think about it. How many times have you whispered your own small demons into the dark? The anger you swallow, the jealousy you hide, the loneliness you never admit. Those are your spirits. You do not need magic circles or ancient words to call them. They already live in you, waiting to be acknowledged. Goetia, at its core, is not a manual for sorcery. It is a map of the human condition. Every time Solomon called a name, he faced one more part of himself. And maybe that is why his legend endures, because every person who hears it feels a spark of recognition. We all carry our 72 names, our invisible companions that whisper in moments of doubt and temptation. The question is not whether they exist. The question is whether we have the courage to listen to them, to speak their names aloud, and still choose to be human. In the old stories, the magician always held two things, a sword and a mirror. The sword was for command, the mirror for reflection. Together, they were meant to balance power with truth. Solomon understood this better than anyone. He knew that a sword without reflection is just violence, and a mirror without courage is just vanity. So, he carried both, not to conquer the world, but to conquer himself. The sword was never about battle. It was the symbol of will, the line that cuts through confusion, fear, and doubt. When he lifted it, he was not threatening spirits. He was reminding himself that clarity begins with choice. The mirror, polished and silent, waited to show him what the sword could not touch. It showed his flaws, his pride, his humanity. The reflection did not lie, even when it hurt. It was there to say, "This is who you are beneath the crown, beneath the circle, beneath the ritual." In our world, we still hold those same two tools, even if they no longer shine in our hands. The sword is every decision we make, every moment we choose integrity over comfort, truth over fear. It is the voice that says no when silence would be easier. It is the step forward when staying still feels safer. The mirror is the pause that follows. It is the quiet breath after action, when we look back and ask, did I act out of love or out of pride? Did I speak to build or to wound? Did I choose light or just my own shadow? Without both, we lose balance. Too much sword and we become cruel. We cut without care. We command without listening. We win arguments but lose people. Too much mirror and we drown in doubt. We stare too long. We question every move. We freeze in the fear of being wrong. Solomon's wisdom was not in commanding spirits, but in understanding balance. He knew that the real battle is not between man and demon, but between strength and self-awareness. The sword must protect. It guards what matters. It draws the line between right and wrong. It stands firm when the storm comes. The mirror must remind. It shows the cracks in our armor. It reveals the motives behind our words. It keeps pride from growing too tall. Together, they become the quiet truth of what it means to be human, to act with purpose, to speak with care, to lead with strength, and still have the humility to see ourselves clearly in the light we create. Every day, we pick up these tools, in small choices, in hard conversations, in moments of anger or fear. The sword says, stand up. The mirror says, look closely. One without the other leads us astray. But held together, they guide us home. They turn power into wisdom. They turn reflection into growth. They remind us that true strength is not in never falling, but in always rising with clearer eyes. Solomon carried them into the circle. We carry them into life. The battle is the same. The balance is the same. The truth is the same. Hold the sword. Hold the mirror. Walk forward. Look back. And keep going. His name was Aleister Crowley, and for many, he was a man wrapped in scandal, myth, and mystery. But behind the headlines and the whispered stories, there was something more, a restless mind searching for meaning in a world that had lost its sense of the sacred. When Crowley read the Goetia, he did not see demons waiting to be summoned. He saw symbols of the human will, reflections of the battle between freedom and fear. To him, the rituals of Solomon were not about calling spirits from the dark, but about awakening the spirit within. He believed that every person carries both light and shadow, and that true magic was not about power over others, but mastery over oneself. In his writings, he spoke of the will, the quiet inner fire that defines a person's path. Do what thou wilt, he said, not as a call for chaos, but as a call to authenticity, to live truthfully according to one's deepest purpose. Crowley lived in a time when faith was fading and science was rising. People wanted proof, not prayer. Yet he understood something timeless, that humans do not just need knowledge, they need meaning. He turned Goetia into a mirror of the modern soul, showing that even in an age of machines and logic, the hunger for the mystical, for connection, still burned. He was far from perfect. He was flawed, often lost, but that made him human, and maybe that is why his interpretation endures. Because he reminded the world that freedom without understanding becomes destruction, but freedom guided by purpose becomes art. Crowley did not rewrite Goetia to glorify darkness. He rewrote it to remind us that the greatest magic of all is the courage to live by our own truth, even when the world calls it madness. Sometimes the darkness does not come from outside. It comes from within, soft and patient, like a whisper calling your name when the room grows quiet. The old stories of Solomon tell us that when he called upon spirits, they answered. But what they said was not always meant to frighten. Some voices spoke in sorrow, in longing, in a tone that felt too human to belong to demons. Perhaps they were not monsters at all. Perhaps they were echoes of his own soul. There are moments in every life when we feel that same call. It comes when we lie awake at night, staring into the dark, asking questions no one can answer. It comes when we face loss, when someone we love drifts away, when silence feels heavier than sound. That is the language of Goetia, not a tongue of evil, but a language of truth spoken through our pain. We all carry shadows, not because we are broken, but because light cannot exist without them. The darkness inside us is not an enemy to destroy. It is a reminder that we are alive, that we still feel, that something deep within is still searching for meaning. The mistake is not in hearing the voice. The mistake is pretending it is not there. Solomon listened, and in listening, he found peace. He learned that silence is not emptiness. It is space for understanding. And maybe that is the lesson we keep forgetting. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to walk into the dark and keep listening. The call from the shadows is not a threat. It is an invitation. It asks us to be honest, to admit that we are both fragile and strong, kind and cruel, lost and found. To face the darkness is to know the fullness of being human. When we finally answer that call, we do not fall into the dark. We bring light with us. We carry the small flame of awareness. We speak back with gentle words. We say, I see you, I hear you, you are part of me. And in that moment, the whisper softens, the room grows lighter. The night feels less heavy. We learn to sit with the sorrow. We learn to hold the longing. We learn that every tear is a word the heart speaks when the mouth cannot. The darkness becomes a teacher, not a prison. It shows us where we hurt, where we hope, where we still need to grow. Solomon did not silence the voices. He gave them room. He let them speak until they had nothing left to say. Then peace came, not because the dark vanished, but because he stopped running from it. We can do the same. When the night feels long, breathe. When the questions rise, listen. When the shadow calls your name, answer. Say, I am here. That is enough. That is the beginning of light. In every ancient ritual, after the calling, after the noise and the trembling air, there came a final moment of silence. It was called the license to depart. Solomon would lower his sword, breathe deeply, and speak softly to the spirit before him. He would not shout or threaten. He would say, Go now in peace, and may your path be free. Those words were not commands. They were forgiveness, the act of release. And maybe that is what the entire ritual was always meant to teach, that real power is not in control but in letting go. We all hold on to things that haunt us. The anger that lingers, the memory that cuts, the guilt that refuses to fade. We carry them like invisible chains, believing that if we hold on long enough, we will understand them. But Solomon understood something deeper. The only way to be free is to open the hand, to stop gripping the pain so tightly that it becomes part of who we are. The license to depart is not only for spirits, it is for us. It is the moment we forgive ourselves, the moment we release the weight we have been dragging through the years. It is when we finally whisper to our own shadows, "You may go now. I understand you. I do not need you anymore." When Solomon finished his ritual, the room would fall still. The circle drawn on the floor remained, but something inside him had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by quiet acceptance. He had faced the darkness and survived, not because he was stronger, but because he chose to let it go. Maybe that is what freedom really means. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to face it, to learn from it, and then to release it with love. In the end, the greatest spell ever cast was not to summon, but to forgive. The legacy of the Goetia is not about demons, nor about magic circles or secret words. It is about the human heart, about the timeless search for meaning where light and shadow meet. Solomon's story has lasted centuries because it speaks to everyone. Every generation must face its own darkness and choose what to do with it. The Goetia was never just a book. It was a mirror for humanity's fragile truths, written in courage and curiosity. It taught that understanding beats fear, that control without compassion is empty, and that true wisdom comes from looking inside. Each reader learned not to summon spirits, but to recognize them, to name the fears and desires that shape daily life. That is why the Goetia still lives today. We hear it in art, in philosophy, in quiet moments alone with our thoughts. Solomon's circle is gone, his temple is dust, but his lesson remains. To understand darkness is not to become it. To face it is to reclaim hidden light. Every person who looks inward continues his ritual. Not in grand temples, but in ordinary hearts. We sit with hard questions. We admit our mistakes. We listen to the parts we usually hide. In those small acts, the work goes on. The Goetia's true gift is not power. It is empathy. Every shadow has a story. Every story has light waiting to be found. When we see this, fear loses its grip. We learn to walk through dark rooms without panic. We carry our own small candle, steady and warm. Think of the times you felt lost. A friend's silence. A sudden failure. A night when sleep would not come. Those were your Goetia moments. Not evil, just human. You did not need spells. You needed honesty. You needed to say, "This hurts. This scares me. This is real." And in saying it, the weight lifted a little. Solomon showed the way. He listened to the voices. He named them. He let them teach him. We can do the same. Speak to your doubts. Ask your anger what it wants. Let sadness tell its tale. They are not enemies. They are messengers. The legacy lives in simple choices. Forgive instead of punish. Ask instead of assume. Pause instead of react. Each choice is a step through the shadow. Each step brings more light. Today, no chalk circles mark the ground, yet we draw them still. In journals, in prayers, in long walks alone. We step inside, face what waits, and step out stronger. The ritual never ended. It only moved inside us. Carry the lesson forward. When darkness comes, do not run. Light your candle. Listen. Speak. Walk. The Goetia is not ancient history. It is your next breath, your next honest word, your next brave look in the mirror. That is the legacy. That is the light.